Hello, class. My name is Amilia Osborne, and my presentation is on the American and Chinese Protestant Church. How do they function, and the roles they play in their respective societies? The Protestant Church. The Protestant Christianity community began in the 1500s. The base word for Protestant is protest, and that is because the Protestants separated themselves from the Catholic Church, hence the name Protestant. So that's why we have the Protestant Christianity community. The Protestant Church is made up of many denominations such as Methodist, Baptist, non-denominational, Kojic, AME, Pentecostal. There are over 500 million Protestants in the world. Most Protestant churches recognize only two atonements, which are baptism and communion, which separates us from the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church has over 7 sacraments. Protestantism can best be described as a broad division of Christian churches globally. The church is heavily persecuted at this moment every day. The emerging church and its role in society. The Christian church in China began by holding services in homes, which they call house churches, and are now still house churches and underground churches because they are not government sanctioned services. And in China, there are only 5 major government-sanctioned religions: Taoism, Buddhism, Islam, Roman Catholicism, and Protestant Christianity. Although Protestant Christianity is listed, they can only have government-sanctioned services, which means the government must control everything they say and everything they do. And if you read anything in your Bible that they don't like, you can't read it. And if you want to say anything that they don't agree with, you can't say, which is why they still have house churches and underground churches in China, because they are unofficial, unregistered churches, and they are vulnerable to punishment by the state. And there are 25 to 30 million Chinese. The Chinese Christian community, spiritual leaders are treated terribly. You can be imprisoned for having what they call illegal gathering of a religious group at any time. The government has forbade Christian leaders from preaching about the second coming of Christ and teaching minors the gospel. The church should evolve around the state and not around God. That is what the Chinese government believes. There's a gentleman by the name of Samuel Lamb, for example. He was in prison for 20 years because he was a Christian evangelical, and he had what we call illegal house churches because they weren't government sanctioned. The state imprisoned him for 20 years because he wanted to spread his faith, because he was not going to be limited to what the government wanted. Currently, in 2011, there was also another pastor. He was sentenced to work in a labor camp because he had a house church. This slide is just to commemorate Samuel Lamb. He died this year at the age of 88, and he was a committed evangelist. The American Christian Church is embraced in our culture more often than not in a major way. We have over 75% of Americans who call themselves Christians, and Christianity is embraced by our government. Our government has no control over the Christian church, and I say it is embraced because if you go to any state or state-held meeting at the House of Representatives or at the House of Senate, federally and on the state and local level, there will always be someone who leads in prayer. If you attend just the inauguration of every single president we've had, there's always been someone who leads in prayer. So our government embraces the Christian community. There's an outward expression of our faith on a daily basis. There is no limitations. You have churches who give out food and clothes. You have churches on every corner, churches who hold Bible services and Bible studies weekly and services weekly on a daily basis. So there are no limitations. As I said, are openly embraced. They can preach freely. We have several preaching channels and networks like TBN, like the Word Network, Daystar, Smile of a Child, the Church Channel. The list goes on and on. We also have preachers of TV shows that come on TV, like Preachers of LA. Bishop T.D. Jakes comes on every Sunday. He has a show on BET. This does not happen in China. They're not allowed to have channels where they're preaching the gospel and spreading the gospel. That's not they want. These underground churches, as I said, they're dark, they're dreary. People hold services on farms, 4 o'clock in the morning. These people are meeting because they are dedicated to their faith and they're committed that they are going to continue to fellowship and worship together no matter the limitations of their government. Even though they know they face imprisonment, they are dedicated. Church tends to be Pentecostal. The minority religion is they are minority religion in a hostile society. Churches are held underground and they have house churches. Christianity is not a part of the culture. It is not a religion respected amongst rulers. The communist government runs the church. They do not have the freedom to worship, and evangelism is not allowed. Christianity is the dominant religion in America. In America, church is respected amongst the culture. We have laws against separation between church and state, so the state doesn't really control the fact that there's a church a mile from each other. They don't say anything about the Bibles we read. They don't tell pastors what to preach. They can preach whatever they want freely from our Bibles, and we can openly spread what we believe, and we have the freedom to. Thank you. I hope you learned something from this presentation. I hope there was something you could take with you for the near future. Please leave all questions and comments. I will respond.